Hi guys, Hengist here from House Hengist Comics, and a big welcome back to the channel, Beansters. Today it is Blitzkrieg, part of the Sky Blitz series, episode 33, Willemsdorp, part 2. First, our weekly news segment. Today we are going to be around Moerdijk to the north at Willemsdorp. That's just south of Dordrecht. Here's a nice image of those bridges, over a kilometre span, running across. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about research and why not have a go at it, because it will improve your wargaming and you learn loads too. And talking of learning loads, I thought we'd have a quick look at the parachute origins and their history, which I found quite interesting and remarkable. Leonardo da Vinci is credited with discovering the first and building the first parachute, and this was a fixed wing one with Vranek, who does the first jump in the 1617, I think. And there's huge amounts of improvements, but they're using static areas to jump from. Lenormand, he basically jumps again using the first silk parachute. But women were also very instrumental pioneers jumping, as we can see here, from Garmin and Paulus. But Baldwin was the first to really construct, I suppose, a harness in 1887. And here are some images of those harnesses. Again, they're using predominantly static areas like balloons, or I suppose balloons aren't static, but the Eiffel Tower and buildings like that to jump from. But again, it's Morgan and Captain Berry that jumped from the first aircraft, and that is quickly followed by this great pioneer, Georgina Tyner Thompson, who was to conduct over 1,000 jumps, and she went in 1913. But the first military usage, I understand, was by the Italians in 1918 by a bold young lieutenant jumping behind the lines. But the Russians were the ones that really took this big, and they're the ones who had lots of parachute schools and decided to really develop it, building a lot of equipment. Here's a picture of the hat here, or the helmet. The Germans, of course, learnt from very quickly from the Russians when they were working together with them, and the Allies, of course, hastily developed this as well. A lot of work being done in America, as you can see. Here's an American football helmet on some of these early jumpers. So as you can see, other nations were to follow, including the Japanese, and there are some interesting Japanese jumps in the Far East as well. The Russians also begin to start using air landing operations as well. We'll see gliders. The Germans were the first to build it, but these come in 1943 to 45. Here's a lovely picture of Her Majesty's, the Queen Mother and the Queen there. But what we've also got to look at is obviously the effect of the parachute as well. It was to drop equipment and gear. There's even a lovely picture here of them dropping handlers and their dogs as well. They dropped landmines as well using parachutes. But the Germans and their Fallshrimjaeger and Luftlandssturm units were really the pioneers, ultimately, of modern parachute warfare. They were the ones to conduct all this, as we've said, over Holland. I mean, they'd done work as well in Norway and Denmark, and let's not forget that. They bring gliders really into being effectively with Eben and Mail. They use effectively Gummiputschen and dummy parachutes as a distraction device. But they also highlighted the vulnerability of transport aircraft, and you needed a lot of aircraft to protect them. Containers were also a problem, because the Germans always had to collect their equipment. But also an interesting operation is Operation Niwi. I did an episode on this, not the actual glider landings, but they used Storks here. They ran out of transport aircraft, and this was one of the first operations in Belgium. I mean, the plan seemed logical. They were going to use Fallshrimjaeger and land at Nives and I think it was Wintry, which is why it's called Niwi. But ultimately it didn't go quite as well as they'd anticipated. There were crashes, and they used Grossdeutschland, I think 2 to 3 men in an aircraft. It wasn't a hugely successful operation, but it shows how the Germans are thinking about using air operations. And we're even going to see some float plane air landings. So let's catch up now. Previously, what happened? Well, in this episode, we've already seen the landings. These are off table, and we're seeing airstrikes and basically the aircraft drop their paratroopers that are going to then come on and effectively move into combat. And I'll produce a map here at the end of this to demonstrate where they're arriving. But we've got an unexploded bomb, We've also got the Fallshrimjaeger concentrated, arriving, collecting their containers where they can, and making offensive moves towards taking effectively the bridge and also the little congregation of buildings north of that. Now, the Dutch have several platoons without ammunition. They have to rely on a telephone to effectively call in the artillery that's supporting them. And they make some bold bayonet attacks, but are to be thwarted in the end, ultimately. And their telephone is to be tragically captured by the Fallshrimjaeger. They kill the commanding defensive fire. These guys are taken prisoner and effectively locked into a bomb. We may actually see an escape at one point during today's game, but we'll have to wait and see. We've also got, as I said, the Fallshrimjaeger moving up to that railway embankment, which is a shallow embankment, but it gives bulletproof cover. There's only been 3 ammunition collectibles, really, so they've only got 3 out of the 5 platoons that are armed, and so it's going to be a very tough action. And here's the map, as I promised, showing where the original landings and operations are. So without further ado, guys, let's get into today's battle action. And we start this action in the strange half-light that we have over this table. Effectively, the first things that happen in our new sequence are the activation cards, which go down and are allocated to each platoon. Here in the farmhouse we can see a lone sentry which has been allocated to guard the unarmed Dutch platoon of prisoners, and this platoon is now moving out, and it's moving forward along with the rest of the German forces hastily to make this sort of attack. They've dillied and dallied for a little bit too long, but it's the Dutch who open fire. But against that embankment they are ineffective, and the Germans keep moving forward using the irrigation ditch and then up to that embankment. The unarmed platoon without ammunition is now racing desperately ahead as a bus suddenly arrives coming towards the bridge, and out of it, disgorging, is another platoon of paratroopers that have landed off table and are now basically going to go for that objective as the rest of the Germans continue to move forward. The second platoon that was guarding the farmhouse sort of lays out indication markers on the ground. They used a lot of this type of thing for refitting, and this is where the next landing point is going to be for their weapons company. And as you can see here, the Germans are now pushing through their displacement move or stormtrooper over, and they use light smoke to cover one base to restrict the amount of fire, and then proceed to charge in with great elan and a great aggression. They drive in, having killed some casualties, and overrun the poor Dutch rifle platoon, which didn't really have a chance, and they start to move towards the actual Willemsdorp itself. This drives off the platoon of Dutchmen, but they don't break, and what we now see is basically the first platoon, which is going to make an assault against the garrison, but there's barbed wire there, guys, and that never plays well. And as this the Dutch basically race towards the wharf side, because basically the only other point of ammunition is on that little wharf side. There are the crates, and that's where they're heading for. As the Germans prepare to make an assault, and they basically launch in with everything they've got, but several teams are trapped on the wire. There's defensive fire, and basically they become pinned down in that drill square. It's an old factory as such, and basically are pushed back. 3 teams, including their energetic officer, is caught on that wire, as you can see here, and they are to sustain withering fire from that. The heavy machine gun in the woods, that's on overwatch and is waiting, covering that retreating Dutch formation that's going for those for that ammunition. Meanwhile, the Germans successfully move up and effectively take the little town to the north and remove the flag, and they've captured that objective, cutting them off as aircraft now suddenly come in. They've seen their landing visual markers, and they're basically preparing to drop. But we hear anti-aircraft fire, and suddenly one of the aircraft, which is carrying some packs and flak guns, is hit, and basically she starts to descend at a rapid rate. She's spiraling out of control, and basically she is to crash effectively off table into that woodland. Here is a lovely contemporary photograph, as we can see right here, a lovely black and white shot. But also on the ground, when they land, the mortars and machine guns lose 1 team each. Not a great landing. And then we get Lieutenant Lem. Finally, he's crossed that 1 kilometer and he's chasing across that bridge, but he's under really heavy fire from that twin heavy machine gun bunker. They're struggling basically, and Lem is really caught in the open. You can see the bunker there and the police unit, which are firing, and they bring a casualty down. Even though there's bulletproof cover and it's long range, they inflict a casualty. But back on the barbed wire, around the garrison, so to speak, it's carnage. And effectively we can see the Germans pushing up. There's a lot of Germans, but they're a long way from their secondary objective. Again, the Dutch try and move into that greenhouse as the German mortars open fire, bringing down smoke to try and cover 1st platoon, which is in a real difficult situation. The cards aren't good for it, it's being fired, and then we get a breakout here from the Dutch prisoners who effectively escape and go for the telephone because the line hasn't been severed. And we can see the rest of those German Fallshrimjaeger moving now towards the heavy machine guns in the woods. They're going to try and displace them so that the rest of their troops can double up, along with Lem, who has been doubling, but now he's been stopped and brought to crawling space. We can also now see here, effectively, the doubling Fallshrimjaeger racing because they're running out of time. There's a battle now which takes place between these unarmed brave Dutchmen who try and storm the farmers and go up the stairs. Of course, there are modifiers here, and we're hand-to-hand fighting with the spotting team that is surprised there. And effectively that fight results in grenades being thrown downstairs and effectively driving off those unarmed Free Dutchmen. But in the woods, the Fallshrimjaeger attack and start to drive in the poor Dutch who are fleeing for that ammunition. We've still got problems down here in the courtyard of the factory. Smoke is all over the place, but there's so many casualties now. That platoon is being really massacred, but they drive out the Dutch, who then immediately reoccupy the position as the heavy machine guns are effectively overrun by the 3rd platoon, and that keeps driving forwards. Finally, at last, the spotter, who is unable to spot, decides he's had enough with the ruddy telephone and smashes the damn thing basically against the wall, as we can see here. Meanwhile, effectively, the Fallshrimjaeger are now driven back out of the garrison, and that finally that platoon gets to the ammunition. But Lem, he can't get any further forward. They've run out of time, effectively, and they haven't quite made it. They've secured one objective, but not taken the other. And effectively, ladies and gentlemen, it's a Dutch victory on time. The Dutch taking 35 victory points to the German 15. What can we say in postscript? What a fantastic game that was. There was so much more in it, but the Dutch conducted a brilliant defence. We've really enjoyed researching this, and for the Fallshrimjaeger, it was a really good fight. They were just a little bit slow off the start, so to speak, but they did really well. Perhaps if they'd driven the bus down, that may have done well. But ultimately, in the historical context, these bridges have been taken, and effectively these bridges are now open, and we're going to see Germans pouring across these bridges. The Fallshrimjaeger have proven just how remarkable they are. Here they've marked that bunker themselves. But hey-ho, we've got some Highlanders which have arrived. Dear Johnny has kindly sent us in all these wonderful Highland troops, and Johnny Walker's a fantastic painter, and he's done these really proud. And most importantly, he's provided us with the single man teams, or the special dual team that we've created, who are going to be Private Johnny Walker and of course Corporal Frank Keith, and they will be fighting the British Everyman's War. Alas, they're being commanded by that cad and bounder Major MacDonald. But guys, do check them out, because the lads do some great stuff at Panzer Schule on YouTube, so watch that. And also check out our playlist, because we've got some great videos. We've got Dordrecht coming up. That's a splendid parachute operation as well, a big one. We've got the Allied forces entering into Holland. And I'd also like to give a big shout out, of course, to Mike Boost, the fantastic Fallshrimjaeger, and Kevin's Dutch, Kevin Fright that is. I love this piece that Mike has done. So always remember, honour, and for goodness sake, never forget, guys, all the fallen. So it's over and out from me for now. and stay safe.